Thank you very much. It's just great to have heard Joe speak. As he said, we knew each other, but we haven't seen each other for 20 years. That tells you how long some of us have been out in the trenches fighting, and we aren't stopping, and we're never going to give up. He's proof of that, right? Yeah. And also, just as you heard John introduce me, and PhilaPOSH in particular, I wanted to just point out that Jim Moran, who is the Director Emeritus of PhilaPOSH, is here, as is two board members of PhilaPOSH, our board chair, Kathy Black. Is Kathy still here? There, wherever, somewhere. And also Paul Grubb, who's on our board, are both here too. And it's true that we have been PhilaPOSH forever, and again, most recently have been trying to make the connection when the six people, four of whom were members of the public, were killed when the building collapsed on top of the Salvation Army thrift shop. That brought home to everyone the connection between job safety, worksite safety, and the public safety. And this climate change issue we see as an extension of that, the fight for the worker right to know and then the community right to know, which PhilaPOSH led back in the day. That fight in this community is another model, actually, of the kind of fights that can be launched that bring together community and labor and won. That fight actually resulted in major changes to the OSH Act. The entire hazard communication standard came out of that history of fight. So if we look back, we can see some models that can actually guide us as we move forward to try and think of ways where labor and community can work together. I'm going to be very quick, but I just a couple of things I wanted to say. When I was young, was lucky enough to organize where I worked. I worked at a university in Boston, and we became members of a small independent sort of lefty union known as District 65 at that time, which then merged into the UAW, and suddenly I found myself a member of the UAW, and I was so proud of that fact, and I continue to be proud of that fact, and I gladly continue to pay my dues to the UAW because of its history. And we were also blessed because of a leader like Walter Reuther. I remember, now I don't know, you can maybe confirm whether this was true, but I was told that the first Earth Day in the United States was held at the Black Lake Education Center. It was a teach-in. How many people knew that? The first Earth Day was at a union education center in this country. Part of history that we forget, because we used to be there. We used to have this movement more together, and we have to go back to that. I came into labor through fire. I had to strike twice to become a member of the union, and I found that our union, my union, did talk very positively about environmental issues, but over time, that issue became much more difficult and much more complicated as fewer and fewer auto plants, which wasn't all that the UA represented, but was certainly the base. As there became fewer and fewer organized auto plants in the U.S. for a whole variety of reasons that happened, then the issues that presented themselves in terms of trying to save those jobs and keep those jobs and keep one more plant from closing and moving to Mexico or moving wherever it wants, changed the whole psyche within the UAW. I mean, it really did. You were living it, and you could see the change that happened in terms of how people talked about things and how the broader vision got more and more clouded and more limited. And I've got to say, well, let me ask you this. How many people here have had personal experience with someone they knew or continue to know today who's had where they work closed, a plant where they work closed, or a shop where they work closed? All right. You know, I did too. And in some of those cases, I mean, I cannot tell you the stories I personally knew of workers, and many times these were places that had been opened a long time, so the seniority, people were in there who had 20 years, 25 years. And their last day as the plant closed, when they walked out, they had heart attacks and died in the parking lot. Those aren't stories. It happened all the time. I remember some of their names. People who got so depressed that they committed suicide within a week after their plant closed. It happened all the time. And so, for many of you that are young and weren't part of that movement, to understand that when we talk about people who had good jobs, and those jobs are then lost for a variety of reasons, and they think maybe also because of the implementation of stronger controls, regulatory controls that may affect their industry, it is terrifying. It is really terrifying, and it's real. People actually die when those things happen. And so that has had a profound effect on the leadership of a lot of the organizations who not only have had the legal obligation to represent people, but have actually been very personally impacted by the stories of what's come out of that and how deep and real that fear is when people see good jobs. And let me say also that even as we talk about the implementation of green jobs, and I've been to the BlueGreen Alliance and the Green, has anybody been to the Washington Green Jobs, Good Jobs conferences? Like thousands and thousands of people there. Labor led it. But nobody, you know, when we talk about good jobs, what the hell does that mean? What does a good job mean? I know lots of good green jobs being created at $10 an hour with no benefits. How many people want to wait in line for that? All right? So when we talk about just transition and we say, well, we're going to create new jobs, good jobs, let me see you stand in front of those corporations to be sure that they give people health benefits and $20 an hour and regular raises and a pension plan. It's not easy to win those concessions from these employers. Let me give you an example. I spent a year in Smyrna, Tennessee, the first effort for the UAW to organize the Nissan plant in Smyrna, Tennessee. It's still not union. Every time we drove out of that parking lot, the police stopped us and arrested us for a backlight being out or whatever. I house called more people, more Nissan workers in Smyrna, Tennessee than you could imagine. Now fast forward, I'm retired, I don't do that anymore, but now I'm at PhilaPOSH, I do more than I did then, I think, at PhilaPOSH, right? But I talked to some organizers recently who told me, they've been down at Smyrna, Tennessee, looking at that plant again. 70% of the workers in that plant are now through a temporary agency. So the people who build your Nissan are temporary workers. You want to guess what they're making? So when we talk about good jobs and we talk about just transition, we really need to be clear about what that means and be making a commitment to what that means. Because if we want the refinery, the oil workers in Philadelphia to give up their jobs that they fought very hard to just keep because their entire community depended on those jobs, then we better not be saying, oh, you can move into this job at McDonald's. You follow me? When we talk about just transition, and I really love what you said, Joe, about the fact that the environmental movement has to help create a jobs plan, and the labor movement has to help create a climate change plan. Now, I talked about the pain that those of us in labor felt when we saw people lose their jobs. But that pain we also feel when we hold a child in our arms, a grandchild, a relative, a child on our block, and we feel the shame that they're going to inherit a future that I'm not even sure they'll be able to survive. And I feel a deep shame about that. A terrible shame, and I think all of us in labor feel that because we're not only trade unionists, but we're parents, and we're grandparents, and we're in the community. And climate change, we know it's here. So the challenge now, it seems to me, the real challenge we have is to figure out community after community with great examples, great resources we can go to, like the Sustainability Network, but we have to put our own plan together here. We can take the ideas Joe presented, and we have to start building here, both within our unions, within the community. We've got to quit being tone deaf to each other, and I agree with that. We have been too. And we can do it. We really have no choice. We really don't have a choice. I think the reason I agreed he'd be here tonight and why we're talking about this at PhilaPOSH and why this is engaging everybody is because we're fucking out of time.
Yeah, right on.
I think. Right on. So Sue Edwards, who was on the committee that planned this event, sent me, and this is my last remark, I know I'm out of time, sent me a... Yeah. You aren't in the labor movement without cussing. Let me just say that's a fact. Anyway, she sent me an article which I had not seen, which was by a woman named Naomi Klein, entitled "Why Unions Need to Join the Climate Fight." And she delivered this speech in September of 2013 at the founding convention of Unifor, a new mega union created by the Canadian Auto Workers and the Canadian Energy and Paper Workers Union. And that really caught my attention because the Canadian Auto Workers used to be in the UAW, and when they left to form the CWA, I was heartbroken because conventions and meetings were always so much more interesting. When the Canadians were there, it was a real loss, right? But at the end of the speech, I just want to read this very quickly. She said, to close off, I want to read an excerpt from Article 2 of your brand new Constitution. That's for this newly formed union in Canada. So this is what it says. Our goal is transformative, to assert common interest over private interest. Our goal is to change our workplaces and our world. Our vision is compelling. It is to fundamentally change the economy with equality and social justice, restore and strengthen our democracy, and achieve an environmentally sustainable future. This is the basis of social unionism, a strong and progressive union culture, and a commitment to work in common cause with other progressives in Canada and around the world.